Hello everyone, welcome to Paranormal M. Today, after a long day at work, I finally get to sit here again, in front of the microphone, to do what I love most. Tell the mysterious stories that you've sent from all around the world. I'm truly very happy to know that these stories can help you fall asleep more easily, feel comforted, and less lonely. So, my brother died when he was 11. Accidental drowning. One of those bright, ordinary days that turns into the line in your life where everything is before and after. A few months later, he started visiting. We didn't say that at first, of course. We're a practical family. My dad was an electrician, ex-Navy, the guy everyone called when their lights went out. Mom was very no-nonsense, but little by little it got too weird to ignore. The first thing that we all agreed had to be him was the music box. Before he died, my brother, his name was Danny, had picked out this porcelain figurine music box for our mom for Mother's Day. He was so proud of it. You know, one of those wind-up ones with a tiny on-off switch underneath. My mom kept it in the china cabinet, way up behind the glass where nobody touched it. One night we're all at the dining room table, halfway through dinner. Nobody's left their chair. We're passing the potatoes, just talking about school and work when, suddenly, from the other room, this tinkly little tune starts playing. We all stop, forks midair. We look around like, did somebody forget to mention we're haunted now? My dad stands up, and of course we all trail after him. He walks into the living room and stops in front of the china cabinet. The doors are closed. Inside, behind the glass, that little music box is slowly turning, playing its song. Nobody's near it. The cabinet hasn't been opened. Dad opens the door, and the music stops instantly. He picks up the figurine, flips it over, and there's the switch, set firmly to off. He just stares at it for a second. Then he puts it back, closes the cabinet, and we all go back to the table and finish dinner in total silence. You could hear every clink of the silverware. Afterward, Dad's sitting back with a cup of coffee and one of his roll-your-own cigarettes, and he says, real quiet, almost to himself, Danny was always a bit of a practical joker, wasn't he? And that was kind of the moment we all collectively decided, okay, he's still here. When my mom passed away years later, I inherited that same music box. It sits on my shelf now. It's quiet most of the time, but I always half expect it to start playing on its own again. Let me back up a little and tell you about the house, because that's where most of this happened. When Dad retired from the Navy, we moved back to my parents' home state. They bought a double-wide trailer on this half-acre lot, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, 6 kids. So you can imagine how cramped that was. Eventually, Dad bought a single-wide, renovated it, and attached it to the double-wide. Suddenly, we had what we jokingly called the triple-wide mansion. 5 bedrooms, 3 baths, a big family room, and this huge country kitchen with an old wood-burning cook stove. It was chaotic, but it was home. We'd been in that house about 5 years when Danny died. Not long after, we had this bizarre electrical problem, which, you know, in an electrician's house is almost offensive. One day, the power just goes out in half the house. But here's the strange bit. It wasn't like, oh, the front half is out. It was half of each section. The ends where the bedrooms and bathrooms were, fine. Lights, outlets, everything working. But the living room, dining room, kitchen, and family room, completely dead. Dad does what he does best. He shuts off every appliance, every light switch, so nothing gets fried when the power comes back. He crawls under the house, checks every wire, every junction box, every fuse. For days. He calls in his electrician buddies. These are guys who live for this stuff, and they can't find a single thing wrong. This went on for 2 weeks. Half a house lit up, half a house in the dark. Dad finally grumbles that he's going to have to rewire the whole place from scratch. Everything springs to life. Lights blaze on, the TV shrieks to life, and the stereo flips on at full volume, blasting "Stayin' Alive" like we're in the world's most aggressive disco. I will never forget the look on my dad's face. He just froze. Red in the cheeks, jaw clenched, the veins standing out in his neck. This man was furious. My sister and I caught each other's eye and started giggling. Then Mom started chuckling. Within a minute, we were all laughing, and even Dad cracked. He shook his head and muttered something like, "All right, kid, you got me." Because if there was one thing Danny loved, it was flipping switches and messing with the TV and stereo, cranking the volume right when you weren't expecting it. It was exactly his style. Danny wasn't an only son. I had another brother, Mark, who was just a year younger than him. They were close in age and almost the same size, so Mom used to buy their clothes in pairs whenever there were sales. They had matching shirts, coats, pajamas, you name it. To keep it all straight, she'd write their initials on the tags. After Danny died, Mom went into this intense grief-cleaning mode. She gathered every single thing in the house that had his initials on it. Clothes, shoes, anything. She donated all his clothes to the local secondhand shop. She couldn't bear to see them. Then she turned his old bedroom into a storage room, kind of a pantry. A few months later, an old Navy buddy of my dad's came to visit with his family. To make room, Mom put me in the pantry on a rollaway cot and gave my bedroom to the guests. First morning I wake up in there. I stretch, look over, and there's a pair of pajamas laid out neatly across the foot of the cot. Folded, like somebody planned for me to wear them. I pick them up and wander into the kitchen where everyone's sipping coffee. I hold up the pajamas and ask Mom, "Hey, did you leave these for me? Or are they for Mrs. Harrison or one of the kids?" She takes them, glances at the tag, and I see her whole face change. Her eyes get wide, and she lets out this sharp, panicked sort of shriek. "Where did you get these?" I'm stunned. "They were on the bed when I woke up. I thought you put them there." On the tag are Danny's initials. She immediately storms off and drags poor Mark out of bed, accusing him of hiding those pajamas from her and pulling some sick prank to embarrass her in front of our guests. He's standing there half asleep, swearing up and down he has no idea what she's talking about. But I know what I saw. No one but me and a whole lot of cans of green beans slept in that room that night. So yeah, as far as I'm concerned, my prankster brother went into his old bedroom, into what was now basically a pantry, and laid his pajamas out across my bed. And Mom? Oh, she was big mad. There were plenty of smaller things too, little jabs and reminders that he was still around. At his funeral, for example, when we all arrived at the church, the main doors refused to open. They just wouldn't budge. They weren't locked, they just wouldn't move. We were all bunched up on the steps while people fiddled with the handles and pushed and pulled. Eventually, they had to reroute everyone to a side entrance. Those stairs were narrow and winding, and carrying the casket up there was awkward and nerve-wracking. After the service, we walked back out through the front doors with no problem at all. They swung open smoothly, like nothing had ever been wrong. Then there was the dryer. One afternoon, it was just Mom and me at home. We're at one end of the house when we hear the dryer start tumbling away on the other side. The laundry room door is closed, but you can hear it going. Thump, thump, whir. Mom sighs and says, "Did you start a load and forget to tell me?" I shake my head. She closes it again. Stands there, staring, like she's waiting for it to start back up. It doesn't. It stayed off after that. Like, okay, joke's over. My dad started finding his slippers in weird places too. He'd swear he left them neatly by the side of the bed, but he'd wake up and they'd be up on the mattress next to his pillow, or at the foot of the bed, pointed the wrong way. Just odd little things that made him grumble under his breath. Stuff would go missing and turn up later in spots we'd already searched. Scissors, pot holders, one shoe from a pair. Clocks and radios would stop working for a day or two and then magically fix themselves. Cupboard doors would be left open. Drawers would be a mess with the silverware all mixed up. Oh, and the recliner in the family room? That thing had a life of its own. We'd go to bed with it in one position and wake up to find it angled a different way, like someone had been sitting there watching TV in the middle of the night. Sometimes, when we turned the TV on, the volume would be set to max, even though the dial was turned low, or the channel would be set to something we didn't even get. One time, the wood pile next to the stove caught my eye. All the logs were stacked neatly, except the top row. Every piece in that top layer had been turned the opposite direction, like somebody had rearranged them just to see if we'd notice. Most of it was the kind of stuff that drives an already detail-oriented mother absolutely around the bend, which, again, would have delighted my brother. My favorite story, though, the one my kids loved the most, happened years later. Halloween night, 1995. By that time, I had a daughter of my own. We'll call her Lily. She was 10, and I let her have a little Halloween party and sleepover. We did the whole thing. Costumes, trick-or-treating, way too much candy, and then Hocus Pocus on TV. After the movie, the girls wanted scary stories. And then Lily says, "Tell them the real ghost stories, Mom." So I turn off most of the lights. We're in the living room. I'm on the couch. They're all sitting on the floor in a half circle, wrapped in blankets, eyes wide. And I start telling them all these stories about Danny in the music box, and the pajamas, and the lights coming back on with the stereo blaring. I'm really hamming it up, doing my best spooky storyteller voice. They're all ooh and no way, completely glued to every word. And right in the middle of a particularly creepy part, the TV suddenly turns on by itself, at full volume. The room explodes with sound and light, commercials blaring, everyone screaming. The girls shriek and pile into each other's laps. I hit the armrest, convinced someone sat on the remote. As soon as we calm down, I say, "All right, who bumped the remote?" One of the girls, big eyes, just points. The remote is sitting on the end table, farthest from me. No one close enough to touch it. Nobody had moved. It was just on. There was this dead silence. And then one of them whispers, "Can we maybe not do any more ghost stories tonight?" I just smiled and thought, "Okay, Danny." Still got it. So yeah, my brother was a prankster in life. And honestly, he stayed a prankster after. Not in a terrifying horror movie way. More like a mischievous little nudge that said, "Hey, I'm still here. Don't forget me." And we haven't. At my grandparents' house on my dad's side, one of my uncles lives there with his family. Let's call him Uncle Martin. He and my Aunt Rosa have 3 kids, 2 girls and a little boy. So it's always a full house, super noisy, super warm. This was back in May, around the middle of the month, when my grandpa's birthday was coming up. The whole family decided to throw him a surprise party, and, like always, when there's a family party, my sisters and I end up helping Aunt Rosa with the decorations. She's the one who plans everything, and her 2 daughters, Sophie and Clara, are like her little assistants. We have this tradition. We start decorating the day before, in the late afternoon, and we just keep going until we can't keep our eyes open. That night was no exception. We were cutting paper, hanging garlands, arguing about colors, listening to music way too loud. All of that. I think we finished around 2:30 in the morning. I'm not totally sure, because by then, my brain was half asleep. Since it was so late, we decided to sleep over in my cousin's room. There were 5 of us girls, my 2 sisters, my 2 cousins, and me. Obviously, we didn't all fit in the same bed. So, my sisters and cousins took the bed, and I said, "It's fine, I'll sleep in the hammock." Because they have this hammock in the corner of the room, right by the window. Honestly, I kind of like sleeping there. It feels cozy. We were exhausted, so we left some of the decorations half done, set an alarm for 5:45 a.m. to wake up and keep working, and crashed. At first, I was completely knocked out. You know that heavy sleep where you don't even dream, you just disappear? That was me. But then, in the middle of the night, I felt the hammock move. It was like someone had pushed it from underneath, or given it a little shove. I woke up a bit, but I was so tired I just thought, ugh, the hammock moved, whatever. And I went back to trying to sleep. I figured maybe I'd shifted my weight or something. A few moments later, no idea how much time had passed, maybe seconds, maybe minutes, I felt this huge tug on my hair. Not like a little pull. It was strong. Like someone had grabbed a fistful of my hair and yanked it. Hard. I woke up angry. My first reaction wasn't even fear. It was pure annoyance. I was convinced one of my sisters or one of my cousins was messing with me. I literally sat up in the hammock, turned around, already with my hand half raised, like, whoever did that is getting smacked. But when I looked at the bed, they were all completely asleep. I mean, out. One of my cousins was even snoring softly, and my younger sister had her mouth open, drooling on the pillow. It was that deep, ugly sleep that you just can't fake. That's when the anger disappeared and the fear kicked in. All of a sudden, I felt this intense cold. Not just, oh, the fan is on, cold, but that kind of cold that runs down your back and makes your skin prickle. The room was mostly dark because we'd turned off the lamp to sleep better. Only a bit of light from outside was coming through the window. I stayed very still for a second, just listening. The hammock wasn't moving anymore. The house was quiet. I could hear someone walking around in the hallway far away. But in that room, it was just the sound of their breathing and a little bit of snoring. My heart was pounding so loudly, I was sure someone could hear it. I remember thinking, okay, if it wasn't them, then what pulled my hair? I didn't want to stay one more second in that hammock. I got up as slowly as I could, because the last thing I wanted was for it to start swinging again. My feet touched the floor, and it felt freezing. I didn't even bother looking around too much. I was too scared I'd actually see something. My sister mumbled something like, move. But I hugged her anyway and closed my eyes as tight as I could. I tried to convince myself I'd imagined it, but it was just a dream, that I'd gotten my hair tangled in the hammock somehow. But deep down, I knew what I felt. It was a hand. Someone, or something, pulled my hair. And let's just say, I haven't been too eager to sleep in that hammock again. I was thinking about which story to share with you next, and I figured I'd go with a more recent one. One that, honestly, I still think a proper paranormal team should investigate. I'm Mira, by the way. I'm 43 now, and I've been psychic my whole life. I didn't develop this later. It's just always been there. Seeing things, knowing things, feeling things I probably shouldn't. It's kind of like having an extra sense that never turns off. There was this town I lived in for a while. In downtown, near the main bus station, there was this old historic house. You couldn't miss it. Big, tired-looking place with peeling paint and these tall, narrow windows. I used the bus all the time back then, so I was constantly walking past it or riding by it, trying very hard not to look. Because there were children there. Ghost children. Everywhere. And they knew I could see them. The very first time I walked past that house on foot is burned into my memory. I had my earbuds in, music turned up, eyes down on the sidewalk. I remember carefully watching where I stepped so I didn't land in some disgusting old wad of gum. It was just a normal day, until it suddenly wasn't. About halfway along the fence line, I got that feeling. You know when you know someone is staring at you and your skin sort of prickles? Now imagine that, but instead of one pair of eyes, it feels like a whole room full of them. I kept walking, trying to ignore it. But the pressure of those stares was so intense that I finally looked up at the house. And there they were. I saw maybe 10 ghost children scattered all over the place, all of them locked onto me. Most of them were pressed up near the windows, faces pale, eyes too wide and too still. One child was standing on a little balcony on the second floor, just motionless, staring right at me, like they'd been waiting. And another one was nothing more than a blur, zipping around inside behind the glass like a bird that got trapped in a room and couldn't find a way out. I remember the one on the balcony the most. The energy from that child hit me like a punch. It was this heavy, seething mix of hatred and anger. Not like a kid throwing a tantrum, but old, deep rage that had been sitting there for a long time. That one felt older than the others, like the leader of the group, or the first to die, or the one who remembered everything. The rest of the children didn't feel hateful. They felt stuck, mostly. Curious, surprised that I could see them. Their faces weren't twisted or monstrous. They just looked like kids who had been alone too long. The house itself dated back to, I think, the 1910s or so. It had that early 20th century look. Tall ceilings, narrow balcony. The kind of place that used to be grand and then just slowly faded. The children were all wearing these long nightgowns, like old-fashioned bedtime clothes. Mostly white or very, very pale, brushing their ankles. Some of them with little lace collars or tiny buttons down the front. At first I didn't understand why there were so many of them, or why they were all dressed like that. It bothered me. I kept seeing them every time the bus went by. Little faces in the windows, staring out at the street, at the people who had no idea they were there. Later on, I found out that the house had been used for different things over the years. Offices, a boarding house, that kind of thing. But at one point, it had been a children's hospital, specifically for kids with tuberculosis. And suddenly, everything made sense. The nightgowns, the number of children, the way the air around that place felt heavy, like it was soaked in old breath and old fear. And on those days, when I did end up walking by, I made a point of acknowledging them. I'd keep my pace steady, look up at the windows, and give them a little wave. At first, they just stared back, like they weren't sure if I was real, or if this was some kind of trick. But after a while, after a few weeks of doing this, something shifted. A couple of them started to wave back. Just small movements. A hand lifting at the window. A little tilt of the head. A flicker of recognition. The one on the balcony never waved. They just watched me. That same hard stare. That same old anger. I always felt like if anyone ever did a proper investigation in that house, that child would be the one they'd have to be the most careful with. There was a story there, a painful one. But the others felt almost grateful, in a quiet way, like being seen mattered. And that's what stays with me the most. Not the fear, not even the anger, but the simple, heartbreaking reality that a bunch of sick children had died there, and then just never left. Time moved on. Buses came and went. People rushed past with their coffee and their phones, and those kids just stood at the windows in their little nightgowns, watching the world go by. So whenever I did pass that house, I always waved. Because sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for the dead is to let them know they're not invisible. You know, every time someone asks me why dolls creep me out so much, I never quite know where to start. So, I guess I'll start before I was even born. This story really begins when my mom was still a teenager. Back then, she and her older cousin, her name was Clara, were really into anything mystical. Tarot cards, candles, astrology, all that. One evening, they went to a kind of spiritism session at my grandmother's old house. I don't know exactly who else was there. My mom never liked to go into too much detail. What she does talk about, though, is the doll. In my grandmother's living room, there was this porcelain doll that always sat on a little wrought iron chair near the hallway. According to my mom, during the session, while everyone was focused on the table and the candles, she happened to glance over at that doll. And the doll turned its head, slowly, and blinked. Not just in her direction, but straight at her, as if it recognized her. My mom swears the doll's lips parted just a little, like it was about to say something. That was enough. She bolted out of the house, ran into the street, and refused to go back inside. After that day, she almost never visited my grandmother again. They already had a complicated relationship, so this incident gave her one more reason to stay away. Now, fast forward many years. It was August 2012. I was 11 years old, and it was my first time visiting that same house. My mom had finally agreed to go back, mostly because my grandmother was out of town and my mom needed to pick up some documents. She had a spare key, so it was just the three of us. My mom, my little sister, and me. The house felt paused. Like someone had lived there once and then just stepped out and never came back. But everything stayed frozen exactly as it was. Dust on the furniture, faded family photos, that faint old house smell that's part mold and part memories. At one point, we were on the ground floor, walking past the narrow hallway that led to the staircase. At the bottom of the stairs, against the wall, there was this small wrought iron chair. And sitting on it was a porcelain doll. She had curly chestnut hair, glassy blue eyes, and a pale face with tiny painted lips. She wore a dusty blue dress with little white flowers and lace at the collar. On her lap, there was a small ceramic dish filled with dried rose petals. Nothing about her seemed strange to me at first. She just looked like an old doll that had always belonged there, like part of the house. So, casually, I called out to my mom. I said, "Hey Mom, this doll is kind of pretty. Is it Grandma's?" The change in her face was immediate. She stopped walking. Her skin went almost white. She turned to me and asked, very quietly, "What doll?" I pointed to the chair. "That one, by the stairs. The one in the blue dress." She walked toward me, her steps slow, eyes fixed on the spot. Then the questions started, one after another, her voice getting tighter each time. What does she look like exactly? Her hair, what color is it? Where are her hands? What is she holding? I remember feeling confused, but I answered everything. Curly brown hair, blue eyes, blue dress with flowers, white lace collar, a bowl with dried rose petals in her lap. more I described, the more my mom's breathing changed. She wasn't just tense, she was terrified. Finally, she whispered, "Stay here," and grabbed her phone. She called my grandmother, Helena, right there in the hallway. I could hear my mom's voice trembling as she asked, "Did you keep that doll? The porcelain one that used to sit on the little iron chair? Is this some kind of joke?" My grandmother sounded annoyed on the other end. I couldn't hear every word, but I distinctly remember my mom asking, "So you're sure you didn't bring the doll back? You're not hiding it from me?" And then my grandmother said something that made my mom go completely silent because it no longer existed. A long time ago, there had been a kitchen fire, accidental, but bad enough that it spread into part of the house. A lot of things were destroyed, including that porcelain doll my mom remembered so well. According to my grandmother, the flames had melted and cracked it beyond repair. She'd thrown the pieces away. The only thing that survived intact, my grandmother said, was that little wrought iron chair. My mom ended the call and just stood there for a moment, staring at the empty air in front of her. Then she turned to me and said, very slowly, "Show me the doll again." I turned back to the staircase, to the chair, and it was empty. No doll, no dress, no ceramic bowl. Just the chair, with a faint ring of dust outlining where something might have sat once, a long time ago. I remember my stomach dropping. I kept insisting. She was right there. I saw her. She was right there. My mom grabbed my shoulders and looked me straight in the eyes. "You're sure?" she asked. "You really saw her?" And I was sure. I can still see her in my mind, as clearly as if she were in front of me now. Curly hair, blue dress, rose petals in her lap. That weirdly calm expression on her face. Not smiling, not frowning, just watching. We left the house shortly after. My mom was shaken, and she didn't try to hide it. On the way home, she finally told me the full story about the spiritism session, about how the doll had turned its head and blinked at her, how she'd run out and never wanted to set foot in that house again. "And the doll burned," she said. "I saw what was left of it. There was nothing to save." We went back to the house one more time a few months later. This time, I avoided looking at the staircase for as long as I could. Eventually, of course, I had to look. The chair was there. Just the chair. Cold, empty, harmless looking. But I still felt watched. I've gone over that day in my mind so many times. I've asked myself if it could have been a trick of the light, a reflection, my imagination, some weird overlap of memories. My mother's fear echoing into my own mind. Maybe I somehow recreated the doll in my head from a story I didn't consciously remember hearing. But the thing is, as far as I know, my mom never told me about the doll before that day. She always avoided the subject of that house and of my grandmother, unless she absolutely had to talk about it. So I don't know what I saw. A hallucination? Some leftover impression, like the memory of an object burned so deeply into a place that it lingers there, visible only to some? Or something that just didn't want to be forgotten? I only know this. I was the only one who saw her that day. And ever since then, dolls have unsettled me in a way I can't shake. It's not just that they look creepy. It's that sometimes, when I see one on a shelf or in a window, perfectly still, I can't help but wonder if, just for a second, it might blink. Alright, let me tell you something that happened to me back when I was 25. So, in Thailand we've got this superstition called Benjapas. People say 25 is a cursed age, that it attracts accidents, health problems, breakups, all the bad stuff. When I was younger, I used to laugh it off like, yeah, sure, numbers are scary now. But then this happened. My friends insisted on throwing me a late birthday get-together. Nothing crazy, just drinks and food near Ratchada. I was actually tired and wanted to go home early, but you know how it is. Come on, it's your birthday, one more round. By the time I finally got on my motorbike to head home, it was close to midnight. The roads were pretty empty. I remember the air felt a bit chilly, and I was just cruising, kind of zoning out, thinking about work the next day. I reached this junction I always pass. Normally it's quiet, but that night, as I was crossing, a pickup suddenly blasted through a red light from the side. I didn't even have time to swear properly. I yanked the handle, swerved hard, and the bike just slipped out from under me. Next thing I knew, I was on the road, sliding. My arm burned, my jeans tore, and I tasted dust and blood. The pickup didn't even stop. It just kept going. I lay there for a second, trying to figure out if anything was broken. My knees were scraped, my palms were bleeding, and my left shoulder felt like it had been punched from the inside. But I could stand. That felt like a miracle already. I reached for my phone to call someone, but of course, perfect timing. It flew out when I fell. When I found it, the screen was cracked to pieces and wouldn't turn on at all. Dead. The bike looked bad. The side was scraped up. The mirror was hanging off. But when I tried starting it, the engine still coughed to life. The front wheel, though, felt weird, kind of shaky. I didn't want to stay in the middle of that road, so I pushed myself back on and slowly rode toward this shortcut, a narrow alley I sometimes used to cut home. By then it was past 12. The alley was almost empty. Old houses on each side, metal gates, those orange street lamps that make everything look a bit wrong, you know? Some of the lamps were working, some were flickering, some were completely dead. I was going slowly, just trying not to fall again, when suddenly the front tire gave up completely. It sank and wobbled, and I had to hop off before I tipped over, totally flat. I remember just standing there in the middle of that quiet alley, bleeding, sweating, and so tired. I muttered something like, seriously? Tonight of all nights? I started dragging the bike along, one hand on the handle, one hand on the seat, the flat tire making this dull flapping sound on the ground. Then I heard a voice, a soft, clear voice from somewhere up ahead, near one of the lampposts. P, what happened to your bike? I froze. I looked up and saw a young woman, maybe early 20s, standing just inside the circle of light under a flickering lamp. She was wearing an oversized white t-shirt that almost reached her knees, and I couldn't really see if she had shorts on underneath or not. Her hair was tied up in a messy bun. From where I stood, I could only see the right side of her face. It was, honestly, she was really pretty, and she just looked so normal, like she could have been someone's neighbor who stepped out to take the trash. I called back, trying to sound less shaken than I felt. My tire's flat, I said. Had an accident back there. She tilted her head a little, still half turned away from me. You're bleeding, she said. You should get that cleaned. I will, I answered. I just need to get this thing home first. She pointed further up the alley, past where I could see clearly. Now, normally, I would be suspicious. A random girl in a dark alley after midnight, telling me where to go. But something about her voice was calm, gentle. Not pushy, not creepy. More like a neighbor giving directions. Really? This alley? I asked. I've never seen a shop here. It's there, she said, like she'd walked past it 100 times. Just keep going. You'll see tires stacked outside the house. Don't worry, the uncle is kind. Tell him Dao sent you. Dao? I repeated. She just gave this small smile, still not turning her full face toward me. Go, she said, before your leg swells. I laughed a little at that, said thank you, and started dragging my bike in the direction she pointed. The alley felt longer than usual, but after maybe a minute, I saw it. A small house with a rusty metal gate and a pile of tires leaning against the wall. There was a dim light from inside and the sound of a TV playing. Honestly, I got goosebumps right then. I'd walked this alley in the daytime before, and I swear I never noticed a repair place there. But I was too tired to question it. I rang the bell. After a while, an older man came out in shorts and a singlet, rubbing his eyes. He looked at me, then at the bike, then back at my bloody elbow. "What happened to you, eh?" he asked. "Accident at the junction," I said. "The front tire's dead. A girl back there told me your shop could help." He frowned a bit. "Girl? This late? What girl?" She said her name was Dow," I answered. "She told me you were still awake." His expression changed, but he didn't say anything about it right away. He walked over, checked the wheel inside. "Inner tube's gone," he said. "Leave it here. I fix it in the morning. You come back after work." I nodded, feeling this huge wave of relief. "Thank you, Uncle. Really. I don't even know how I'd have made it home without this place." He just grunted and started pulling the bike inside. I turned around, wanting to walk back and thank the girl properly. But when I looked toward the lamppost where I'd seen her, there was no one there. The alley was completely empty. Just that flickering light and the sound of some dog barking in the distance. I thought maybe she'd gone into one of the houses, so I walked a bit back, glanced at the gates, the doors. Nothing. No sound of anyone walking away, no doors closing. Just silence. A little chill crept up my neck, but I told myself, maybe she lives right here. Don't overthink it. I bowed slightly toward the lamppost like an idiot and whispered, "Thanks." Then hobbled out to the main road to find a taxi. The next morning, I went back to the shop after work. My arm was stiff, my bandages were already dirty, and I was still annoyed at that pickup driver. The uncle had my bike standing outside, tire fixed, everything wiped down a bit. As he was writing the price on a piece of paper, I casually said, "Thanks again for last night. If that girl Dow didn't tell me about your place, I'd still be pushing this thing around." He paused. "You keep saying that name," he said slowly. "Dow." There were a couple of bikers sitting nearby, smoking and chatting. When they heard the name, they went quiet and turned to look at me. One of them asked, "P, what did she look like?" I described her as best as I could. About early 20s, thin, hair in a bun, big t-shirt, really pretty. I only really saw this side of her face, though. I tapped my right cheek. She was standing under that flickering lamp in the middle of the alley. The bikers exchanged looks, and one of them let out a low whistle. "Was it Dow from Soy 9? He asked the others. Another one nodded slowly. "The one who died last week?" I laughed, thinking they were messing with me. "Come on, don't joke like that." But the uncle just sighed, put his pen down, and looked me straight in the eye. He pointed in the direction of the alley, right under that same lamppost you're talking about. I didn't know what to say. My mouth just went dry. "If you don't believe us," one of the bikers added quietly, "go look tonight. You can still see the white spray mark on the ground where the police drew around her body." I just stood there, replaying everything in my head. How she never stepped fully into the light. How she only turned the right side of her face toward me. how calm her voice sounded. And then it hit me. I never heard her footsteps. Not when she appeared, not when she disappeared. I asked them, "When did she pass away?" "3 nights before your accident," the uncle said. "Same time, late at night." For a long moment, none of us spoke. I thought about how I'd been joking about Benjapas, about bad luck and cursed ages. I thought about that pickup that almost killed me, how close the tire came to the bumper, how my phone died right when I needed it most. And then I thought about a young woman standing under a flickering lamp, telling a stranger exactly where to find help. I'm not going to pretend I'm super brave. That night, when I walked past that lamppost again, I didn't dare look directly at it. But I did notice a faded, uneven white spray mark on the road. And I did say, in my head, if that was really you, thank you. People say spirits in accidents like that can be angry, vengeful, dangerous. Maybe that's true sometimes. But in my Benjapas year, the one they say is cursed, I think I got the opposite. I think I got protection. So now, whenever someone laughs at that superstition, I just smile and tell them, believe it or not, when I was 25, a girl who'd already died made sure I got home safe. So, let me tell you a story that happened to my friend Nara on a trip to Bali, Indonesia, with a big group of international friends. If you've been to Bali, you'll know this, but in case you haven't, most people there are Hindu, and you'll see these beautiful little offerings everywhere. They're small woven trays made of palm leaves, filled with flowers, rice, maybe a biscuit or a piece of fruit. They're called kanang sari, and they're meant to honor the spirits and deities. Anyway, one late afternoon, Nara and her friends were walking to get dinner near Canggu. Everyone was chatting, checking their phones, not really looking where they stepped. Then her friend Leo, one of the Western guys in the group, accidentally stepped right on one of the offerings. Nara, being Thai and having grown up around similar beliefs, immediately went, "Hey, don't do that. You should apologize." But Leo just laughed. A couple of others chuckled with him. He shrugged and said, "It's just, like, trash on the street, right?" Nara felt this cold knot in her stomach. She could feel people at a nearby warung looking at them. So she stepped aside, pressed her hands together, bowed her head slightly, and whispered an apology to the spirits, half for Leo, half for herself for not stopping him in time. That night, they went out for drinks after dinner. The vibe was good. Everyone was relaxed, a little drunk, music in the background, all that. When they finally left the restaurant, they had to walk along a small road, and there were offerings lined up near the entrances to homes and shops. Nara's boyfriend, Ken, who was definitely more than tipsy at this point, stepped on another offering without noticing. The others saw and started teasing him. "Ooh, careful," one of them joked. "The ghosts are gonna get you." Nara didn't find it funny. she told him. Seriously, stop. Don't step on them. But Ken was drunk and being a show-off. He laughed and said, "These are for ghosts? Okay then, let them come." And he actually started stomping on one or two more offerings, like it was some kind of game. Everyone except Nara burst out laughing. She, on the other hand, felt sick. The air felt heavier somehow. Again, she stepped aside and quietly muttered another apology, asking any spirits listening to forgive them for being stupid and disrespectful. Eventually, they got back to their villa, a nice place with a pool, a little garden, and those dark wooden wardrobes in the rooms that always feel a bit too old and too heavy. Everyone showered, joked around a bit more, and then drifted off to their rooms. Nara and Ken went to bed. She was exhausted and fell asleep almost immediately. Sometime in the middle of the night, she woke up to this faint sound. Scratch, scratch, scratch. At first, she thought it was geckos on the wall. She tried to ignore it, but it kept going. Slow, rhythmic scraping, like nails on wood. She reached out for Ken and realized his side of the bed was empty. Now she was fully awake. The scratching was coming from inside the room. She sat up, heart pounding, and listened. Scratch, scratch, from the direction of the wardrobe. She turned on the bedside lamp. The wardrobe doors were slightly trembling. Nara said her whole body went cold. She forced herself to get up, walked over, and slowly pulled one of the doors open. Inside, crammed into the wooden wardrobe, was Ken. He's a tall guy, about 6 feet, with his head bent at this awful angle against the top of the wardrobe. Shoulders twisted, knees pulled in. His eyes were closed tight, like he was in a deep, painful sleep. And his hands were dragging his nails over the inside of the wardrobe, making that horrible scratching sound. Nara froze. For a moment she thought she was dreaming. Then she yelled his name and shook him hard. He kept saying, "What the hell? What am I doing in there? How did I get there?" She sat him down, handed him a towel, and tried to calm him. When he finally caught his breath, he said he'd been having a nightmare. He said, "There was this woman. She had no eyes, just empty dark holes. She was wearing a white kabaya, like a traditional outfit, and she kept following me. I was running down these narrow hallways, opening door after door, but they all led to smaller and smaller rooms, and she was always right behind me. I finally saw one last door and thought it was the exit, but when I opened it, it was just a tiny dark space. No way out." Nara asked, "And then?" He said, "Then I woke up, here," and pointed at the wardrobe. Nara just whispered, "You see? I told you not to make fun of the offerings." But she didn't want to talk about it anymore right then. She helped him clean up, got him some water, and told him they'd deal with it in the morning. The next morning, everyone met up for breakfast by the pool. Almost everyone, anyway. Leo wasn't there. They started eating, and Ken, looking pale and exhausted, told the group what had happened. He described the woman with the hollow eye sockets, the traditional clothes, and the feeling of being herded into that narrow, inescapable space. Nara watched everyone's reactions. A few of them tried to laugh it off, but you could tell they were unsettled. After a while, someone said, Wait, where's Leo? They realized no one had seen him yet, so Nara and a couple of others went to his room to check on him. They knocked. No answer. They tried the door. It was unlocked. Leo was inside, lying on the bed, drenched in sweat. His skin was hot to the touch. He had a fever and was breathing like he'd just run a marathon. They tried to get him to drink water. When he could finally talk, he said in this shaky voice, Did anyone see that woman last night?" Nara felt her stomach drop. "What woman?" she asked, even though she already knew. He said that sometime during the night, he'd woken up and seen a woman in traditional Balinese dress standing outside his window. Messy hair, blank eyes, just staring in at him through the glass. At first he thought it might be some drunk villager or a performer heading home, so he quickly got up and shut the curtains, telling himself he was just imagining things. But later he woke up again. This time the curtains were open, and the woman was inside his room. She was dancing, slowly, her arms and legs bending at strange angles, her fingers moving in those sharp, deliberate gestures you see in Balinese dance, but twisted in a way that didn't look right. Her eyes rolled back and then locked onto him again, empty and cold, as she moved closer and closer to the bed. He said he tried to scream, but no sound came out. Then everything went black, and the next thing he knew, it was morning, and he was burning with fever. At that point, Nara had had enough. She grabbed her phone and called their local tour guide, a Balinese man named Wayan, who'd been showing them around the island. When Wayan heard what happened, he didn't laugh, didn't say it was just a dream. He went very quiet. Then he said, very sharply, "You touched the offerings, didn't you?" Nara admitted what Leo and Ken had done. She expected him to be mildly annoyed. Instead, he was furious. He said, "You cannot do that. It's taboo. Those offerings are sacred. Even if you step on them by accident, you must apologize. If the spirits don't punish you, the villagers might. This is not a joke here." He told them to get ready immediately. No sightseeing, no brunch stop. He picked them up and drove straight to a temple. At the temple, Wayan spoke to one of the priests. The priest listened, then nodded like he'd heard this kind of story before. He didn't seem surprised, just serious. Nara said that as the water ran down her face, she suddenly felt like she might cry. Not from fear, but from this deep, heavy guilt for not standing her ground more when everyone was joking about it. After the ritual, they went back to the villa. That night, there were no more scratching sounds, no women at the window, no strange dreams. Ken's feverish, haunted look faded over the next day. Leo's fever broke. The atmosphere in the group changed. They were quieter, more careful where they stepped, more respectful in general. They finished the trip without any more incidents. Everyone went back home safely. But Nara swears she will never forget that wardrobe, or the look on Ken's face when he woke up inside it, or the way Leo described that woman dancing in his room. So yeah, if you ever go to Bali, or honestly, any place with traditions you don't fully understand, please, be respectful. Those little offerings on the ground, they're not decorations. They're not trash. They mean something to the people there. And maybe to things you can't see, too. you ever find yourself down in Lower Manhattan at night? If you do, I want you to remember this, because once you've heard it, you'll never look at Trinity Church the same way again. So picture this. It's late October, one of those evenings when the air is just cool enough to raise goosebumps, but not so cold you can't pretend you're fine without a jacket. The city noise has settled into that low, distant hum, and the fog from the Hudson creeps in like it's got someplace very specific to be. Right there, where the old cobblestones lead up to the iron gates of Trinity Church, there's a story that refuses to stay buried. Most folks know the history books talk about a famous duel back in 1804. Two powerful men, once colleagues, torn apart by ambition, pride, and politics. In the version you'd read in school, they're called Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr. But the story I'm telling you, the one that clings to Trinity Church like the autumn mist, in this story, their names are Elias Harrow and Jonathan Brandt. Elias Harrow was the brilliant one, the architect of the young nation's finances, the kind of mind that could see 10 moves ahead of everyone else. Jonathan Brandt was the vice president, charming, calculating, always standing just a step to the side of the spotlight, waiting for his moment. They were allies once, friends even. But ambition is a sharp thing, and over time, it carved a canyon between them that words couldn't bridge. Their quarrels grew louder, the insults sharper, until finally, there was only one way in their world to settle it. At dawn, on a summer morning in 1804, they met with pistols in hand. One walked away. The other was carried to Trinity Church. Elias Harrow was laid to rest there, beneath a marble stone that the weather has tried and failed to erase. The bells tolled for him, and the city moved on. At least, that's what people like to think. But every year, on the last night of October, the church remembers. Locals will tell you, quietly, usually over coffee or a drink, like they're not entirely sure they believe themselves, that if you stand by those iron gates just before midnight, something changes. First, the street lamps along Broadway flicker. Not all at once, just enough to make you check your phone and wonder if there's a power issue. The air grows colder, unnaturally so. You can see your breath even if the weather app swears it's still mild out. Then, the heavy wooden doors of Trinity, those massive old doors that don't move without effort, creak open. No one touches them. No one is there. Inside the yard, where the tombstones lean and the names blur, a low mist begins to rise. It curls up from the ground, threads itself between the graves, and drifts toward the center of the churchyard like it's being pulled by invisible hands. And that's when people say they hear it. Two voices, faint at first. Not quite words, more the shape of anger and regret. They say if you listen closely, you can pick out Elias's voice. Tight, controlled, still trying to reason. And Jonathan's. Sharp and bitter, like every sentence is a wound. Then comes the sound no one ever forgets. The crack of two pistols firing almost at the same time, echoing off the stone walls and stained glass windows. People who've heard it swear there's no mistaking it. It's not a car backfiring, not construction, not fireworks. It's the sound of old gunpowder, of iron and smoke and choices you can't take back. If you're brave or foolish enough to peer through the gate when that happens, some say you'll see them. Two men, half-shadowed, standing 10 paces apart. Elias Harrow, in a weathered blue coat, his white cravat smeared with a ghostly hint of blood. His hand shaking just slightly as he lifts his pistol. They raise their weapons. The air goes still. Even the city seems to hold its breath. And then, just as quickly as it begins, the scene shatters. The gunshots fade. The figures blur and dissolve back into the mist. You'd think that would be the end of it. But Trinity has one more memory it refuses to let go. After the echoes die away, another sound rolls in. The rattle of wooden wheels on cobblestone. The hollow clop of hooves that never quite touch the ground. A carriage appears at the edge of the fog. Always the same one, they say. A black, old-fashioned hearse carriage, drawn by 4 shadowy horses whose eyes glow faintly in the dark. It pulls up right in front of the gate, as if waiting for permission to enter. Inside the carriage, under a white shroud, lies a body. Elias Harrow. If you look closely, and I don't recommend it, but I know you're going to be curious, you can see the edge of his face, the sharp line of his jaw, the cravat at his throat staying dark where the bullet tore through. The driver sits hunched on the bench, draped in a long coat, a wide-brimmed hat hiding his face. Some people say he has no face at all, just shadow. Others claim they saw their own features staring back at them, empty-eyed. Whoever he is, he always does the same thing. He leans down, as if addressing someone only he can see, and whispers. No one's ever been able to make out the words. A warning, maybe. A confession. A promise. The horses stamp once, twice, and then the whole carriage rolls backward into the fog and disappears, like it was never there. Now, the strange part, and yes, it gets stranger, is what happens to the people who witness it. There was a woman a few years back, a photographer, who thought it'd be fun to get some moody Halloween shots around Trinity. She told a friend later that as soon as she heard the pistols, her camera shut off. Full battery, brand new card, and it just died. Her phone too, black screen, useless. Another guy said his watch stopped for exactly 3 minutes, starting at midnight. When it ticked back to life, the carriage was gone. So were the figures. And in the stained glass windows of the church, where he'd caught the reflection of 2 dueling men just moments before, there was nothing but his own face staring back at him. People report the same things again and again. Devices failing, breath puffing out in white clouds on a night that isn't that cold. The sudden feeling that someone is standing just behind them, close enough that if they turned around, they'd bump shoulders. But when they do turn, there's no one there. And yet, and this is the part that keeps the story alive, every Halloween, someone new goes to stand at that gate. Sometimes it's a couple on a ghost tour who hang back from the group just to see. Sometimes it's a local who's walked past Trinity 1,000 times but finally gives in to curiosity. Sometimes it's someone like you, who heard the story from a friend and thought, it can't be that bad, I'll go see for myself. They stand there, hands wrapped around the iron bars, listening. They wait for the deep, distant toll of the clock. They watch the doors. They hold their breath, wondering if this will be the year the duel repeats, if the past will drag itself up from the graves for one more performance. Maybe they'll see nothing at all, just a beautiful old church and a quiet, foggy street. Or maybe, just maybe, they'll hear the faint echo of a pistol, the rattle of invisible wheels, and feel the weight of 2 centuries pressing down on the space between what history recorded and what it refuses to let go. So, let me tell you about this trip we took to Baguio. It was late September, a few years back, when my sister-in-law, Anna, booked us a room at this old hotel along Quezada Road, just a short walk from Burnham Park. She really wanted us to experience the classic side of Baguio. Yung Luma, my character, hindi yung modern and fancy. I already knew the place was old. I'd Googled it beforehand. But I didn't expect this. Heaviness. The moment we stepped inside. The lobby was quiet, almost too quiet, and the hallways leading to our room on the 4th floor were narrow and dimly lit. You know that kind of yellow light that never fully reaches the corners? Parang laging may nakatago sa gilid ng mata mo. When we entered the room, my heart sank a little. It clearly hadn't been updated in years. The curtains were faded, the paint was peeling in some spots. The wooden floor creaked with every small step. Even the building's facade outside looked tired, like it hadn't been repainted in a long time. There were 3 beds, a big window overlooking Burnham Park, and outside the sky was this flat gray. A storm was on its way. Typhoon Ompong was in the forecasts that week, so the whole city felt extra gloomy. We dropped our bags and I went straight to the bathroom. As soon as I closed the door and turned the lock, I felt a sharp sting. Parang tinusok yung daliri ko. I looked down and saw a fresh cut on my finger, deep enough for blood to bead up and start running down. I just stared at it like, ano to? It made no sense. I've used 1,000 door locks in my life, but I'd never cut myself on one. And for it to happen the exact moment we arrived, it didn't feel like an accident. It felt wrong, like something was saying, I'm here. I wrapped it with tissue and went back out. I told my husband Mark and Anna about it, brushed it off with a nervous laugh, then went to open my suitcase. Now this part really bothered me. My luggage had a number lock. I've used the same code since I bought it. I've never changed it. I punched it in, pulled the latch. Nothing. It wouldn't budge. I frowned, tried again. And again. I must have dialed that code 10, 15 times. Still locked. You know that slow, creeping feeling that someone's messing with you? That's exactly what it felt like. A thought slipped in. Maybe it's not just us in this room. Maybe something's playing with us. In the end, I had to force the zipper out of the lock to open the suitcase, and I just snapped. Out loud, I said, half nervous, half annoyed, Friends, huwag niyo naman kaming pagtripan. Kakadating lang namin. I really meant it. It didn't feel like I was talking to thin air. It felt like I was talking to someone. Mark immediately dismissed it, saying it was all coincidence. Anna agreed, but I could tell they were both a little uneasy. That first night, we decided to sleep with the lights on. It was actually Anna who insisted, and Mark didn't argue. Si Mark kasi, may tinatawag tayong third eye. He's very sensitive, easily startled by energies or presences. So we pushed the beds closer together, and he took the middle bed, like some kind of human buffer. Nothing big happened that night, but all three of us felt it, that sense of being watched. Like eyes were on us from somewhere in the room, or just beyond it. The next morning, the air felt extra cold, and it wasn't just Baguio weather. We needed to leave early, so I volunteered to shower first. I went into the bathroom, closed the door, and started my usual routine. I turned the faucet on to adjust the temperature, then turned it off once I was ready and stepped into the shower. So I'm there, back facing the faucet, eyes closed, lathering shampoo into my hair. And then I hear it, the soft creak of the handle turning. The water suddenly starts running. For a moment, I just stood there, heart pounding, water running behind me. And I could feel that same presence from the day before, that thick, heavy feeling in the air. But the logical side of me fought its way through the fear. I told myself, baka natamaan mo lang ng likod mo. Baka may problema lang sa gripo. So I slowly turned, shut it off again, and kept repeating in my head, don't acknowledge it. Don't acknowledge it. Wala yan. Wala yan. I finished my shower, pretending nothing was wrong. The rest of that day was actually lovely. We roamed around Baguio, ate street food, walked around Session Road, passed by Burnham, enjoyed the cool air. Ang saya namin. For a while, I forgot about the weirdness in that room. We got back to the hotel around 10 p.m., tired and ready to sleep. We turned on the TV for a bit, chatted, then eventually settled in for the night. The lights stayed on again. Now here's the part that still gives me chills whenever I think about it. Around 3 a.m., I woke up. At first, I didn't know why. The room was quiet. My body was heavy, like I'd been yanked out of a deep sleep. I was about to roll over when I heard it. Crying. Very soft at first, muffled, like it was coming from the next room. I lay very still, listening. The sound was faint, but clear enough that I could feel it vibrating through my pillow, through the headboard. Someone, or something, was weeping. My whole body went rigid. I remembered what the front desk had told us when we checked in, that the room beside ours was empty. I slowly turned my head to check on Anna. She was fast asleep. Then I glanced at Mark. He was already awake, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. In a low voice, he whispered, "Naririnig mo?" My eyes widened. "Oh," I whispered back. I wanted so badly to believe it was something normal, so I forced myself to say, "Baka naghihilik lang yung guest sa kabila." Even though I knew there wasn't supposed to be anyone there, I clung to that excuse like a lifeline. Then Mark said quietly, "May humahawak sa braso at paa ko." That's when real terror hit me. I went completely silent. It felt like the air around us thickened, My skin was crawling, but I didn't dare move. He reached up and tapped the headboard above him. It made this hollow, empty sound, like the wall between our room and the other room was very thin. But the crying didn't stop. Whoever or whatever it was just kept sobbing. Not loud, not dramatic. Just this soft, broken crying that went on and on. I don't know how long I lay there, staring at the ceiling, pretending not to hear it. Minutes felt like hours. Somewhere between fear and exhaustion, my body finally gave up and pulled me back to sleep. Looking back, I think the only reason I managed to sleep at all was because I kept forcing myself to be logical, to downplay everything, even when my gut was screaming otherwise. The next morning, we checked out and headed back to Manila. Nobody said a word about what happened. The whole bus ride home was quiet. It felt like we'd made this unspoken agreement. If we don't talk about it, maybe it can't follow us. We stayed at Anna's condo in Manila for 2 more nights. On that first night back, when we finally felt safe enough, we broke the silence. Over dinner, one of us joked about the creepy hotel, and suddenly everything came spilling out. Anna admitted she'd felt it too, that sensation of being watched. She said the bathroom made her especially uneasy, like someone was standing just behind her while she brushed her teeth. Then she told us, almost in a whisper, that when she took a bath, she'd heard someone murmuring right behind her ear. Not quite words, just a whisper. Then Mark shared what he'd been keeping mostly to himself. But on that night with the crying, everything changed. As the sobbing seeped through the wall, he said he suddenly sensed her clearly. A woman, a black figure, standing at the foot of our bed, just beyond the circle of light. He didn't see her face, just the outline of a woman, all in shadow. Maybe she was the one we heard crying. I still don't know the history of that particular hotel, but Baguio itself carries so much tragedy. Earthquakes, war, countless stories of loss. When I think about that night, it makes a strange kind of sense that some of that pain might still be lingering in places like that. And yet, Baguio City will always be beautiful to me. Majestic, even, with its cool air, pine trees, rich culture, and breathtaking views. Despite everything we experienced, a part of me still longs to go back someday. But I'm grateful for one thing. Whatever that presence was, it didn't follow us home. Mark told me later it was a good thing we never directly acknowledged it while we were there. Never talked to it, never called it out. Because once you do, once you really notice them, they notice you. So I'll leave you with something my husband said, words that honestly changed how I see things now. Don't wish to see ghosts or spirits. Kasi kapag nasa pinakamababa ka na, dun sila umatake. And after that night in Baguio, I believe him.